Okay, welcome to another episode of Patiently. So on this episode, we'll be talking to Sara Bassett. Sara and her husband, Paul, have been long-time friends of mine. Sara is 35, a buyer for a Cornish clothing company, and has been with Paul for 18 years. They have 2 cats. She enjoys driving far too fast, loves exotic holidays, and started trying for a baby in 2016. Sara, thank you for the time to come and talk to me.
No worries.
I know evenings are tiring now, to say the least.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah.
I didn't catch the beginning of the introduction. That went dead. Did you mention pregnancy? Yeah.
I just had a brief intro. But look, it should have caught it. It might just be signal your side. I'll have a listen afterwards, and if it's no good, I'll redo it and add it on. But look, just the one thing that I wanted to ask, and it's trying to have the listener in mind a little bit. But when Paul sent me that text with trying to tell me that he's going to be a father, which was very confusing to me the way he did it. And then, we had a few conversations, and then I saw Paul when we were out, and it wasn't quite as clear to me. I must have missed the Instagram post until I saw Paul that night. That crikey, you guys have had like one hell of a time. And the first question that really came to my mind that I just, thought I'd leave it for another time was how long were you guys trying before maybe you or he were sort of saying, well, surely something should have happened by now?
Yeah. So you have to try for a year before any of the medical profession will take you seriously. I think after about 6 months, you start to think, well, hang on a sec. Everything that I was told in school was that one wrong move would signal disaster.
Yeah.
And actually, after 6 months, I was like, this isn't right. I think I probably had a routine doctor's appointment anyway for something else and mentioned it to the doctor, who, of course, just says, oh, just keep trying. These things can take a year, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But I think, I just had a feeling that something wasn't right. So it was after that kind of year point that I really started pushing for something to be done. It very much depends on the doctor that you get. I was quite lucky. I saw a female doctor and she completely understood what I was saying and my concerns, and we started going down the route of tests and what have you. However, I've spoken to other people who've been made to wait 2 years before they've been taken seriously on that.
Are they in different areas of the country, or are they same area, just different doctor?
Nope, same area, different doctor. It's because Paul's a year older than me, they saw he just kind of fell into the right kind of age bracket. He was 35 at that point, I think.
Yeah.
So they start to take you a bit more seriously at 35, and thankfully kind of Paul fell into that category. But it just depends on the doctor you get, I think, to be honest.
Crikey. So you got a year done, and then they were sort of saying, now you can come and have conversations and tests and so on. And how long was that process before they were like, look, here's the problem?
So let me think. So we started August 2016. I'd say it was kind of August 2017 when I started pushing for tests.
Yeah.
The tests that we had, obviously Paul had some tests, I had some tests. It came back pretty clearly what was likely to be the issue. However, there's quite a few that they like to do, so those went on probably until the February of 2018, I'd say. Some more pleasant than others, as you can imagine. Particularly for me, there's a few kind of more unpleasant ones which involve quite a large group of people. having a good route around. Whereas for men, it's, you know, it's a lot easier. So yeah, I'd say that went on probably for a good 6 months.
Right.
I'd say.
Okay.
It's
a long time for you guys to be going through. I assume you were were you trying at the same time, kind of hoping that we can call all this off?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's something that's constantly going on, and I think, you know, that's something I've said to you before, is the waiting is just the worst part of whether you're trying,
isn't it? It's always
the
unknown.
It's the unknown, and it's also whether you're trying naturally or whether you're going through IVF or ICSI or, you know, whatever IUIs. There's so much waiting, whether you're waiting to see a consultant or you're waiting for tests or test results or drugs to be delivered or egg collection or whatever. Just the whole thing is just an endless game of improving your patience, because it just drags on.
Yeah, crikey. I mean, when I read your post, I was going through it, and I was like, I cannot believe, like, and that's the other side of it, that you guys have come through it now, that, you know, you are pregnant.
Yeah.
And you made an announcement, as nearly everyone does on social media, with a little bit of a story of some sort.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. How many people did you talk to about this throughout the process? I mean, I gather you really didn't let many friends or family in on the subject.
No, I think the thing with letting people know is, once you let them know of what's going on, then they constantly want an update. And if it's a good update and you want to be talking about it, then that's great. But the odds are against you, and when you've been unsuccessful or something hasn't gone the way you hoped, then updating endless people is just the most exhausting thing.
Like rubbing salt into a wound, I guess.
It literally is. Yeah. That's why at the beginning I said to you, did you mention about my pregnancy? Because actually that was something I probably wouldn't have mentioned myself, because pregnant people, when you're desperately trying for a baby, are just the most irritating people in the world. You know, you should be happy for them, but you really can't. You really hate them.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's funny, you know, there's perspectives in life that you just sometimes, like, you're never even remotely familiar with until you're, you know, presented with the journey you've been through. And I had my head in my hand just before I went out with your husband, just thinking, Christ, you know, obviously I was not even aware, and I can't believe, you know, that and the length of time and the emotions involved. I mean, was there much cost involved? Obviously, there was NHS play in this, in a reasonably large bit, but I'm sure there was some cost, wasn't there?
No, we've been incredibly fortunate. Well, the NICE guidelines say that everyone under the age of 40 should get 3 free goes on the NHS. However, that isn't the case. There's only, I think, about 12% of NHS trusts which do offer the full 3 goes. Devon and Cornwall, where we are, they offer 1 go. Whereas if you lived in Manchester, you get 3. If you lived in the Peterborough, Cambridge kind of areas, you don't get anything free on the NHS. You have to pay for it. Okay. So as I say, we've had 1 free go, which if you're lucky enough to have any embryos frozen, you also get 1 frozen go. So we've had 1 fresh and 1 frozen go, and been fortunate enough to conceive on both cycles. Obviously the first cycle for us ended in miscarriage, which is just absolutely devastating. But in terms of
that, Sarah, it's just like
it's a real it has a real sting in the tail, obviously, with IVF. I mean, miscarriage is devastating for any couple, but for me, the IVF was just that extra sting, because you're not only you're not only grieving for the baby you've lost, but also for the process and knowing that you've got to go through all of that again from the beginning. But in terms of cost, back to your question, no, we've not had to outlay anything because we have been so fortunate in terms of our odds and our percentages.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, you're getting through it now, and everyone's aware, and you know, you're getting into the second part of the whammy, which is just pregnancy, full stop, rather than the IVF part of it. If there was someone that you were happened to bump into, or you're talking to, maybe even listening to this, that was where you were 6 months in trying, and they're starting to get worried and a bit panicky and all of this, what would be some of your sage advice? What would you help them get a perspective on or prepare them for?
So if they've been trying for 6 months naturally, it would depend on their age. If you're around 30, a woman around 35, I'd start pressuring your doctor to get those tests done, because I think there's a certain amount of intuition in this. I felt there was something wrong. I was right, and I felt there was something wrong probably 4 or 5 months in. But as I say, we've had to wait for that year. I mean, that there's the age-old thing, isn't there, of just relax. I could just flip and punch people when they say that, because it's just
give it time. Give it time.
Yeah, give it time. Go on a holiday. Just relax. Yeah, no, that's not helpful advice. Although to an extent that does apply with IVF, but that's a whole other conversation in terms of becoming obsessive over your protocols and your schedules and what have you. But yeah, I just say go with your gut, go with your intuition. If you think something's wrong, then start pushing for answers.
And you mentioned that in just some questions I had, just stay away from Dr. Google. Did you find massive conflictions or really bad advice, or what was going on there?
The thing with Dr. Google is, well, personally, I can comfortably work myself up into a frenzy of anxiety through a visit to Google for whatever topic. I think a lot of people do that. Yeah. A good example is one of the tests I had. It's called an HSG, reasonably invasive test that they do. And thankfully, I hadn't stumbled onto Dr. Google for that one, because if I had, I would have been absolutely petrified of what I was going to encounter. The descriptions of it on Mumsnet or on whatever these forums was just horrendous. And either way, it was something I needed to have done, and actually it was fine. Not desperately comfortable, but it was absolutely fine. However, if you'd gone into it having read what was on the internet, you would be petrified, and it's just no benefit. You don't gain anything from these chat rooms, and I'm a complete hypocrite in saying that, because if I get up my my search engine, there is all kinds of stuff on there about the things that are making me anxious at the moment at 22 weeks pregnant. So I am a complete hypocrite, but that is a
well,
key
it's trying to help someone going through the same story and just saying, hey, look, just take this with a salt, isn't it, really?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, my anxieties are pretty rife, to be honest, but if someone else isn't quite as crazed as me, then they might manage to stay off Google and just go with what's on the NHS, go with what's in a book or something,
something
half
a bit
sensible.
More, what would you call it? Authoritative, maybe.
Exactly.
I mean, did the nurses and doctors manage your expectations a little bit with, right, we're going to do this first, then this, and then there's this thing that if you read online, you're going to get worried about, but this is what it actually is, so read this. Like, did you get any of that?
No, the information is reasonably limited. Each test or each procedure comes usually with a leaflet, which I think is probably why people are driven to the internet to find out a bit more.
Yeah.
There's only so much you can glean from an A4 piece of paper about, you know, whatever procedure it is you're having done, and in terms of why and how, that it's not necessarily answered.
Okay. And then you mentioned that you can prepare yourself with physical elements, but how you can't predict how each different person is going to react to each situation, so it's actually quite difficult to plan that.
No, absolutely. In terms of so as I say, they give you there are leaflets. They do give you a certain amount of information about as you enter into the IVF process, and you start taking whatever drugs you're likely or you might encounter. You might encounter sickness or dizziness or bloating or bruising from the injection sites, or whatever. And yeah, that's great that you're being told about that, but actually what isn't covered is how you will be feeling about the process, whether you're feeling overwhelmed, or as I say, I suffer greatly from anxiety, or the drugs themselves, what they will do to your emotional state. So there was one particular drug that when I was taking it, and I didn't really clock it at the time, but actually looking back, it made a lot of sense once I'd spoken to a friend who was on the same journey. A particular drug that when I was taking it, I was extremely depressed and extremely negative and pessimistic about the whole process, which when it's a stressful process anyway, and you're feeling anxious, or you're feeling that kind of rising panic about time slipping away from you, a drug that exacerbates that issue is not a great thing to be taking. And it was only really when I came off that drug, and as I say, spoke to my friend Flick, she was like, oh my god, that drug, I was just horrendous on it. And I was like, oh god, yeah, you're right, it was that one. And if that had been highlighted, I think you'd be much better placed to understand what you're feeling and why you're feeling that. And also
you might be able to actually balance out what's going on in your head if you're told this could happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which might allow you to see through the drug for the greater good, so to speak.
Exactly, yeah. If you thought, oh, this drug which you take for 3 weeks is going to make me really depressed, okay, I can handle that, we've just got to push on through. And it is we, not I, because from Paul's perspective, if he knew that drug was going to make me depressed for 3 weeks, then he'd be able to support me better, rather than thinking, oh my god, what the hell is going on here?
And then when obviously there's a couple want a baby to grow a family and have those great experiences in the future, and whilst you're doing this process and going through IVF, how was Paul with it all? I mean, what was there for him in this? I mean, obviously he was doing the best he could for you, but at the same time, he's part of the equation, and it's I mean, from your perspective, how is he doing?
So Paul, it would be interesting for you to talk to Paul actually to get his perspective.
Yeah, right.
And it's almost kind of telling that you're speaking to me and not to Paul, because that's something that he's found the whole way along. In that, the man is completely ignored through the whole process, through consultants.
Sorry, I just can't believe that I've basically just walked straight into that one, haven't I? Really?
Through like consultants' appointments, the tests. Paul's role in this process is really minimal. His entirety of this role was spending a few minutes in a rather dingy room with some rather suspect magazines, whereas
he didn't get any help then.
Whereas for me, the entire focus of IVF, whether the issue is, you know, male issue or female, you know, the drugs, the everything else, it's up to the woman to do it. So from Paul's perspective, he's felt incredibly isolated and left out of the whole process. So yeah, I'd suggest you talk to him on that side.
Well, I'll send a message in a minute. But again, you know, in all honesty, I mean, there's going to be a huge amount of value for that, because, you know, for other people going through the process that he's gone through, just to, you know, what would he advise others? Well, I will, you know, definitely have a similar sort of conversation with him on it. So, Paul, if you're listening, I apologise, and Sara, if he's not, tell him I will talk to him.
No, he's not here. He's at football.
Oh, okay. Now, I think you've probably got a few statistics under your belt which you've been confronted with through the journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's the most shocking one?
Well, I think the most shocking one for someone entering into the IVF process is the success statistics. So if you're under 35, then, I mean, people vary on this, but it's around 35% chance of it being successful. And as you get older, that rather horrible percentage decreases. So when I hit 35 in May, I had a mini kind of meltdown, because that meant my percentage went down by like 3 to 4%. So we were down to like a 31%.
From where?
Or from 35% chance of it working to maybe a 31% chance of it working. And by the time you hit 40, I think you're down to, it's about a 10% chance, they like to tell you, of success with an IVF cycle. For me, having been through it, and as I say, having researched extensively, the thing that bothers me about the percentages is they don't take into account an individual circumstance. Right. So that's a sweeping statement of success. It doesn't take into account whether the issue is male factor or female factor, or just simply unexplained infertility. And in my mind, I don't know whether, you know, I'm not a doctor, I don't know, but for me, a female factor issue, I would imagine, has less of a success rate than male. I don't know, but you know, I was really interested to have that percentage broken down, and I've never been able to get that. No one's ever been able to provide me with that information. So as I say, when you look at our percentage at 100% success, when actually we should have been at 35, that is when I say we've actually been incredibly fortunate to have the success that we have, because it's not a given. And I think when people go into the process assuming that they're going to get a baby at the end of it, that's not the way to look at it. And the NHS is quite pessimistic in the way that they treat IVF. They say you have to treat it as a course of treatment, of 3 treatments ideally. So they're not expecting it to work, and they set you up going into that not so that you don't expect it to work. And again, obviously that adds to the pessimism that you're already feeling, and the drugs and the whatever else. So it is quite a negative.
Yeah, but I mean, are you grateful for that pessimistic view given your outcome?
Yeah, absolutely. Because,
and do you think that's the right view to give people going into IVF, to give them that view of the future and set the bar a lot lower?
Yeah, I think you have to be realistic.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lady who I'm aware of through a friend of a friend, who she's just had her fresh cycle. She's she's had that horrendous 2-week wait, and in her mind she was pregnant. She was absolutely determined that she's had her fresh cycle, it's worked, definitely pregnant. She told an awful lot of people that about their treatment and what have you, and in her heart she thought it had worked. And it didn't. You know, she got that negative result, so it was absolutely soul destroying for her, because she had just created this fantasy in her mind that it had 100% worked, and the fact that it hadn't was just awful.
I mean, that it kind of leads to that other point of mental health. I mean, it's quite ripe at the moment, just for everything. I mean, in the workplace, at home, children, and but you know, how much of a focus was there on the psychological aspect of this? Have you guys been offered any counselling of any sort, or?
Well, you're offered one session on the NHS, which, you know, I don't feel like you can cover a huge amount in one session, to be honest.
Yeah. Maybe they're just testing the water to see how much someone needs it, and
maybe, I don't know. Yeah. But no, mental health isn't really a focus, and as I said, I think it should be, because there's so much emotion that goes into it. The emotion that's there anyway, the anxiety about not conceiving naturally. For me, there was kind of this sense of rising panic that, you know, I was 32 when we started this. I'm 35 now. You know, you only have a certain amount of time to make this happen, and the sense of time slipping away from you does kind of cause this sense of fear and panic. And when you combine that with as I say, the effects of the drugs and what have you, then in terms of your mental health, it can deteriorate really quite rapidly. And if I look back on my Instagram, there's a post that says, and this was while I was taking, you know, some of the drugs. It was, IVF is both the cause and the cure of my diminishing mental health. And that really is how I feel about it, because it's this kind of love-hate relationship with it.
Yeah, it's just I'm trying to wrap my head around it a little bit. It's not an easy thing to get one's head around, is it really?
No, absolutely not. Yeah, I think there's a huge benefit in finding someone who you can talk to about it. As you know, I have a separate Instagram page that I used, that I set up when we first started having tests, and I find charting our journey quite cathartic, to look back at where we've been, particularly when progress can be so slow. It's good to see where you've been, and it was a public, you know, it's a public thing. I've always shared it, and through that I got chatting to a woman who is in the same kind of situation as me, and we really hit it off. And it turned out that actually she lives 5 miles away from me. So I know, it's great.
Yeah.
I know, the chances, I know, it's ridiculous.
I mean, just to be able to have someone to have that conversation with, and you too, you know.
Yeah, it's been great to have her, and we've both found it, you know, we've absolutely clicked. We're on, you know, completely the same wavelength, and to have someone who knows exactly what you're talking about, who you can talk about the drugs to, or the weird side effects. You know, I know more about her than anyone I know. She probably knows more about me than Paul does in terms of emotional and, you know, that kind of thing, because she completely gets it. Whereas, yes, you can talk to a close friend. I'd spoken to a close friend about IVF, but, you know, she conceived her daughter naturally and easily, and with the best will in the world, she cannot understand you know, what you're going through. So if I was talking to someone who was starting out on this journey, I would, you know, there's a massive community on Instagram of IVF warriors.
Right.
There's so many the hashtags, and it's just such a supportive community. Yeah, exactly. The support I've found from that community in terms of IVF, but also in terms of miscarriage. There's just, I'm constantly bowled over by the women on Instagram. But if that's not your thing, there's groups, there's, there is support out there, but you do have to go look for it.
So that's something that the NHS could actually bring to the table, which is just, helping people going through the same thing at the same point, through the same journey, just being able to have a conversation with each other. And, really now it should be very easy, something like Facebook. They could create a private group and call them, Q4 2016. And
it's like anything, isn't it? Like an NCT group for for pregnant women, half of that is, you're learning about what's going on, but also ultimately you're making friends. It's the same thing, having that group of people that you can share stories with. And as I say, some of the things I know about my friend Felicity, I don't know that kind of information about any of my friends. I wouldn't want to know it, but but it is quite a special connection we have. And we're both incredibly thankful that she's pregnant, I'm pregnant, and it's our kind of bond continues.
The support continues as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what you talked a lot about. And I know you mentioned as well, just on the support side of things, is talking to your partner. Obviously people might think that's a silly thing, but I don't know. I think communication is taken for granted, and not enough people put enough effort into actually listening and really trying to understand the other person. There's a lot of assumptions going on. Did you guys feel that your communication improved through this, or did you kind of have to draw each other out of holes occasionally?
I would say that our communication probably has improved, and Paul, bless him, has tried to understand and tried to be involved. But it's hard, isn't it, when you're injecting drugs into your leg, for him to, there's a physical aspect or whatever, and he can see that and he can support you through that if it's a painful physical process. But emotionally, as I say, I think it is hard for your partner to understand what you're going through. So all your partner can really do is just support you as best they can through it. And
was there anywhere online that you felt that you both could actually get reasonably good insights or advice from through those times that you were going through that? Like, if anyone was listening that you thought, well, go here because I found this brilliant, you might not, but is there anything that you might suggest there?
There's a book I'd recommend that's worth reading, the IVF Survival Guide, which is written from a couple's perspective. So there's a woman's perspective and a man's perspective.
Okay.
I found it incredibly funny. The woman is brilliant. There's an awful lot of information in there, but it's written quite lightheartedly, and I found that a really useful book. The guy, Paul found him a bit of a wetter, to be honest. But
what's a wetter like?
He needs to. I hate the term man up, but.
Oh right, okay. So he's soft, might be.
He was a bit hopeless, but there are some points in there from a man's perspective that were kind of useful. Okay. Overall, a good book to read, because there is quite a lot of information in there, and also in the back of that book, which is incredibly useful, is a list of questions to ask your consultant when you go for your first IVF appointment. Yeah. It's questions that there is no way you would think to ask those. Yeah. And actually, it's a really good list.
God, yeah, I just before talking to you, I was thinking through, you know, Kerry and I having Charlie when we had him, you know, 4.5 years ago,
Mm.
and my role within the pregnancy. You know, I mean, there is a heavy focus on mum and baby, but
Yeah.
one thing that I found useful and helpful, and I don't know if you even considered it, but it helped give me a role in the pregnancy was, and some people are totally against this, and there's some people that really don't agree with it, but it was hypnobirthing. Have you heard of that? Are you familiar with it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm all for Paul getting involved
Yeah.
as long as he stays up the head end.
Yeah.
And I think Paul would certainly want to stay up the head end.
Yeah. Well, the thing I found with hypnobirthing was it gave me an education,
Yeah.
B, a role, and
Yeah.
C, things to do. Even
Yeah.
like on the day when we were there, I mean, you know, it taught you as well that you can have a preference list, but if there's something that doesn't go to plan, like it did for us, then you basically have to let the doctors do what they're there to do. But
Yeah.
it really gave me a really good handle of exactly what's going on with a woman's body when she's going through labour. Fascinating. And it actually drew me into the process a little bit, which that helped me. I don't know whether that would be something Paul would be.
Yeah, well, I mean, from his perspective through IVF, having not been involved in the process, I think anything that involves him is important, and he's certainly upped his game in terms of involvement. I mean, he has surprised me, having started this process saying that the whole thing was my cockamamie idea, to
Say that again.
So IVF, Paul has always thought, is a huge kind of, he's always worried about the strain of it on me. And if he had his choice, he wouldn't have gone down that route. He probably would have gone down the adoption route or what have you. Whereas certainly from a woman's perspective, that I wanted to try IVF first, because it's not about necessarily having a child, it's about having our child. So yeah, it's kind of been a running joke that this is my cockamamie idea. Whereas now, yeah, he is a lot more supportive and is really kind of getting into the pregnancy side of things and kind of softening a bit and talking about things and listening to the various complaints that I have. And you know Paul, he's not really one for sharing emotions.
No, he's well, it's like guys, they have their moments that they'll have their few beers, and then a glimmer of something opens up, and then oh, squirrel, you know, there's something takes the attention away, and subject moves on. So really, I guess there is no summarize of it really, but anyone listening that's about to go through the journey is, I think is the ideal person listening to this, is to say that the process you go through, it's the process that's the hard part. It's the waiting for everyone else to come to you and answer your problems. And
yeah, absolutely, the waiting is the hardest part.
Preparation plan or something.
Yeah, the waiting is the hardest part, and that is not focused on at all. I mean, the period, the 2-week wait, from when you do your transfer to doing that pregnancy test, is just the longest 2 weeks of your life. It just, because you're counting down to it, and it's just hideous. But yeah, the whole process it is a massive exercise in improving your patience. And that's the thing with that kind of just relax point, is when you're trying naturally, that's really not a helpful thing to say. However, with IVF, I'd say that is actually really important, because to an extent you've just got to let it wash over you and just not forget about it, but you can just torture yourself with the waiting. So yeah, it is what it is.
There's a girl on her way, so we look forward to meeting her.
Yeah,
and I'll arrange to have a conversation with your husband. That'll be interesting.
Well, I mean, he is insulted that you didn't want to speak to him.
I thought he was this tough man that he keeps telling us all.
No, you might have bent your bridge there.
Oh, bridges to build, of course. All right then. Well, I'll say thank you, Sara, and bid you good night.
No.
And if anyone else listening to this podcast at the moment would like to follow Sara's Instagram, I think it's _the_bad_and_the baby. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
That's right. Excellent. And if anyone listening does want to have a conversation with me on this subject, whether it's UK based or around the subject of medical travel involving this, then please do contact us after and below. Thanks.